My guest today is someone who's devoted much of his spare time to Doctor Who. He's not only watched the shows, he's spoken at conventions, he's organized conventions, but he's also written a book about the subject. Now, I'm not good at math, but I worked out that if 5 million people on average watch one episode of Doctor Who, and there are 862 episodes of Doctor Who so far, the audience is 8.5 billion people.
I'm the Doctor. I'm a Time Lord. I'm from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Kasterborous. I'm 903 years old, and I'm the man who's going to save your lives and all 6 billion people on the planet below.
It seems a long time ago that two teachers looking for a missing pupil entered a time machine called the TARDIS, beginning a 60-year journey through time and space.
You're going to need these.
Ours is a space and time machine that can blend in with its background.
What, you mean it's covered in invisible paint or something?
No. It adapts to suit its environment.
It gets stuck in one shape.
A police box.
Police box?
How gorgeous would that be? An ordinary 20th century object on the surface of an alien planet.
Fantastic.
At first, the show was almost like a history lesson, using time travel to meet characters from the past. And that's a strand of the narrative that's lasted till today.
It's a police telephone box from London, England. That's right, Adolf. The British are coming.
I think you underestimate Robespierre. He has a talent for commanding support.
Only if he is allowed to speak.
Yes, of course, that is exactly right. Yes, but I promise you I shall try to make it a roaring success. You'll have to play something special. Oh, hello.
But never mind that, Your Majesty. Up on your feet. Pop up.
How dare you? I'm the Queen of England.
I'm not English. Elizabeth, will you marry me?
What's so good about this program is that the format is infinitely flexible. Anything can happen to anybody, any place, any time.
But I can't die. Tell me I can't. I haven't even been born yet. It's impossible for me to die. Isn't it?
If I could start the destruction of everything that's evil here, then everything that is good would survive when Cortez lands.
But you can't rewrite history. Not one line.
Yes, you are. You are the Doctor.
Yes, I am. I'm the Doctor.
Oh, good for you, Doctor. Good for brilliant old you.
Is there something wrong with you?
And the Doctor and his companions, when they aren't interacting with the past and the present and the future, they're saving the world from unspeakable evils.
Once I was the puppet. Now I pull the strings.
You still intend to fire that rocket on London?
And then later, when this planet is in ruins, I shall take over.
And after 60 years, the show has reached a sort of maturity where it can survive people lampooning it mercilessly.
I can communicate with the Master by carefully controlled breaking of wind.
Could I be tied to a different chair?
I'm not Doctor Who, I'm your English teacher.
I don't think you are, though.
Lauren.
I think you're a 945-year-old Time Lord.
Listen.
You know your house, right?
What?
You know your house?
Yeah.
Is it bigger on the inside?
All this means that to attempt to write a book called Doctor Who's Greatest Hits, A Guide to the Best Episodes from Time and Space, is a really tough task. And the man who took up the challenge is Alan Siler. So before we talk about your book, Alan, I don't understand how you got interested in Doctor Who. I mean, in Britain, sure, we got it the Saturday afternoons, but it was never shown on terrestrial TV here on broadcast television, was it? How did you find it?
At that time, it was carried by PBS stations in most markets. And I lived in Central Florida, so I was part of the Tampa Bay market. I can't even remember the name of the station now. The difference is that there was no national broadcast. What happened was the distributor, Lionheart, packaged Doctor Who episodes in two different ways. One was the individual episodes, and one was sort of the omnibus edition of like a 4-episode serial edited together into one program packages. My market carried both. So they were basically paying double for Doctor Who because the support was so strong. So they would show the episodic versions on weeknights at like 11:30 or midnight or whatever. And then on Saturday, the omnibus edition, Saturday evening at like 8 to 10 or something.
So I take it these were just the color ones, sort of John Pertwee onwards. Yeah.
At first, it was Tom Baker onwards, the fourth Doctor through, I guess it was basically Tom and Peter Davison, fourth and fifth Doctors. They then, as the groundswell grew, they backed up and did some John Pertwee, the third Doctor. And then a year or so later, they bought the black and white packages. So we got to see what was available of William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton. And so we got to see those black and white ones, which was, I thought, was incredibly exciting.
So you're watching these Doctor Who episodes, and are you getting in touch with other people who say, "Have you seen this show?"
Nope. There was very little of that kind of thing when I was. I started watching in '83, and I knew one person who was watching the show at the time, and she was telling me a little bit about it, and it sounded intriguing. So she said, look, next, I think it was a Wednesday night. Next Wednesday is the show's 20th anniversary. And they are going to be showing a special episode called The Five Doctors, and come over and watch it with me. So my introduction to the show was basically the premise that this title character had at that time been played by 5 different actors, basically in 5 very different ways. None of them looked like each other. None of them portrayed the character exactly the same way. And here, all 5 of them were going to be appearing in one story. And I thought that was just the strangest concept, but I was absolutely intrigued by it.
Is there still a character called Doctor Who? Is there a line that goes through all these different actors and different production teams? How is that still one character called the Doctor?
So I think the characters' values and thought processes are the same regardless of who's playing it. They may play one, maybe, a very genial, young, handsome person, and the other one may be a older, curmudgeonly, stubborn. One may be really irascible, one may be incredibly sarcastic, but that through line of the Doctor's values and sort of like personal mission, I think, is what ties all the incarnations together. So. Okay,
so let's go back to you. You're getting really interested in this program. You have one friend who watches it. How did the fan base come about?
There was that's really interesting, because since all these different markets, so there were little fan groups in most of those markets. I'm not even aware of one in the Central Florida area. I just had my one little friend. And really what happened was John Nathan Turner, who was the producer of the show in the 80s, he really did a lot to court American fandom, to build the fan base in America.
Hello, I'm John Nathan Turner, the producer of Doctor Who. Now, if you enjoy watching Doctor Who, you'll want to support your local public television station. So please, pick up the phone, make a pledge, do it as soon as possible, and support your local PBS station.
He would book these one-day conventions all over the country and bring one of the actors from the show with him.
These events are available at the Wisconsin Union Theater box office,
and usually would bring the episodes that had just aired in England that we had not seen yet. So there was not only the attraction of being able to meet an actor or two, but also to see episodes that you hadn't seen yet. And what was interesting was, and which I thought was so fascinating, was that these were clearly videotaped off air. So it would have the BBC bumper, and it would have the announcer who was like setting up the next program, and then the titles would run. You would see the 4 episodes or whatever, and then a little bit of the BBC trail again at the end. And I thought, well, how interesting. It's like we're watching British television. What I found out later was he never actually got permission to take episodes that had been shot. He just filmed them himself, like videoed them off air, and just brought his own video cassettes.
Now, you met John Nathan Turner, obviously, hadn't you? And did you?
Briefly, yes.
But you met the writers, and eventually you've met most of the Doctors, haven't you? Apart from perhaps Hartnell. And did you meet Patrick Troughton?
I did.
You go that way, I'll go this way. That way one of us will have a chance. When I say run, run.
He did a guest appearance in a Colin Baker story, The Two Doctors. And right around that time, John Nathan Turner did one of those appearances here, and he brought Patrick Troughton with him. And he was an absolute delight. Just funny and so friendly and warm, and clearly had enjoyed his experience coming back to the program after, a few years. So it was really neat.
I'm Peter Baker, Colin Pertwee. No, I'm not. I'm Patrick Troughton, aren't I?
Do you find that the actors and the producers and the writers and the directors actually enjoy the program?
Yes. I can't really think of a case where anyone was, didn't enjoy it or was negative about it. I ran a Doctor Who convention for 16 years, so I interacted with all of these people on both a fan and a professional level, where we were booking these people as guests for our convention and flying them over. And I will say that even there were a couple of them who were difficult to deal with as far as like contract negotiations go. Once they were there, once they were in place, they were all, without exception, amazing people.
There was a period of time in England where everybody used to laugh at Doctor Who and say, oh, the effects aren't very good and the scenery shakes and the monsters are incredible. And yet the fan base grew, not because of, but is it because of it or in spite of it?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I'm not really sure. I think it's in spite of it, because I think it's the imagination behind the show and the quality of, for the most part, the quality of storytelling and the sort of like the way it would draw you into the adventure that's happening, and the charisma of the actor. The lead actor in question playing the Doctor, I think, is a big selling point. And I think that, I think you can forgive a lot if your actor is good, if your storytelling is good. I think that carries the audience in a way that doesn't rely on, how much money you had to spend on a special effect.
Everybody has their favorite Doctor Who. I'm going to guess that yours is Tom Baker.
Well, it's interesting because he was the longest running Doctor. He played it for 7 years. The only other one played it close to that was Pertwee, who played 5 years. Everyone else basically did a 3-year stint on the show. So just from the fact that he was on the show longer than anyone else, he got more exposure. And also most of the PBS stations really only ran the Tom Baker years. So for most Americans, that is the case. Tom Baker is their Doctor. For me, since I started with the 5 Doctors on the 20th anniversary, I got introduced to all 5 at the same time. And so the whole idea of regeneration was sort of the first thing that I learned about Doctor Who. So really, it was Colin Baker who became my favorite, only because, well, not only, but because it was the first regeneration that I got to experience as a fan, that I got to watch happen as it happened. So Peter Davison left the show and Colin Baker came in as his replacement. So it was the first time that I got to actually sort of witness the Doctor changing into a new actor. And I was so intrigued by that whole process. And, Colin, since I first met him in 2013 at my convention, we booked him we were doing a special con for the 50th anniversary of the show, and I booked Colin Baker as a guest. And from that point on, I've met him many times and like had a little bit of a social relationship with him, taking him out to dinner, and we take him shopping when he's in the area or when we see him somewhere else. And he's taken us out to drinks when we saw him in LA and stuff like that. And, we email here and there, and he is just a wonderful, wonderful guy. Just a sweetheart.
So your favorite television? Robin Hood riding through the land.
So did you get any interesting gossip from him about what was going on behind the scenes? Because there are so many layers to Doctor Who. There's the narrative of the storyline, there's the different production teams, there's the politics of the BBC and Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is not a popular show among BBC brass. Among the public, it was. So right. Did you when you talk to these guys, do you get a lot of backstage stuff?
Yes. some of which I would not repeat, simply because I'm told, I'm going to tell you this, but don't repeat it, and that's understandable. The interesting thing about Colin is that there was that 18-month hiatus in between his his first and second seasons, where there was threat of cancellation and there was a big uproar in the public and all this kind of stuff. And there was an awful lot of drama that went on behind the scenes. The script editor, Eric Sayward, wasn't happy with the job anymore. And, John Nathan Turner and he didn't get along. And he thought that Colin Baker was bad casting. And it was just all kinds of stuff. And then when they got around to filming that next season, Sayward quit his job in the middle of the season. So, there's a lot of drama that went on at that time. So, and I've heard some of the behind the scenes stuff, and some from the new series as well. But it's all stuff that's told in confidence. But yes, that has been one of the joys of.
But yeah, finding out. I enjoy the politics of it because I can see how the politics of it bleed into the storylines.
Yeah,
and that's why his character changes so much sometimes. Because somebody says, let's face it, the John Pertwee years were basically James Bond, wasn't he?
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
a lot of James Bond and a little bit of the Avengers. Pertwee was a big. He was a big fan of both of those things and really wanted his character to be the action adventure man and the espionage man.
So people have gathered by now that there was a break in the series. So when you say it's the longest running series, it's not really, because it's two chunks, isn't it? So talk a little bit about how Doctor Who survived. It survived through what? Comics and books and conventions?
Yeah, absolutely. And fan audio dramas and fan films, and all sorts of ways. A big thing I think was in the late 90s, there was a company called Big Finish, which came along, and they actually got the license to produce Doctor Who stuff from the BBC, and they hired all the as many as they could, all the actors from the show, and started producing new stories based on those characters, and started adding to the and at that time there was no danger of the show going back into production, so they could basically do whatever they wanted with these characters, short of killing one of them off. And so they started creating new stories with the Fifth Doctor or the Sixth Doctor, and the important one really was in '96 there was an attempt to revive Doctor Who.
Who are you?
I am the Doctor!
In the fight for eternity, Paul McGann is Doctor Who.
It was a weird co-production between the BBC and Fox and a Canadian production company, so it was all in different hands.
Purple, green, brilliant yellow, yes!
And it didn't really go anywhere. It was a one-off television movie. But because of Big Finish, they hired Paul McGann on, and he has had a really rich run of stories now as the Eighth Doctor, based, from a character that was introduced one time in 1996. So, they've really done an awful lot of work with the show and a really great job with it. In addition to that, there was a novel line that a couple of different publishers were doing, and those really explored the possibilities of the show in surprising and sometimes shocking ways.
Was that Terrence Dicks?
Terrence Dicks mainly was involved in sort of like the 70s and 80s when the televised stories were being novelized. So at the time before home media came around, so there were no VHSs or no DVDs or stuff. There were VHSs for part of that time, but Doctor Who hadn't been released on VHS yet. The only way that you could relive those stories was by the novelizations. And there was a line of 100 and however many of them there were, and Terrence Dicks basically became the editor of that line and wrote 67 of those novels himself.
Extraordinary.
It is. And that's after having done a 5-year stint on the show as a script editor. And before that, having worked as a script writer, and he wrote scripts during the Tom Baker era. And just an amazingly prolific author.
So you decide you want to write a book,
mm-hmm.
and you choose, what is it, the 100 best episodes or your favorite episodes or what?
Well, at the at the beginning, it started out as the 50-ish best. And it started out as a series of Facebook posts leading up to the 50th anniversary. And I thought, well, I'm just going to do a series of posts where I sort of like highlight, my picks for the 50 best Doctor Who stories ever. And I sort of ranked them from 50 to, the number one pick. And, and I released them over a series of weeks leading up to the 50th anniversary. And after that, I thought, you know what? I did all that stuff. I should turn that into a book or something. I had different ideas, but I landed on book as the thing. And so since I was going to be basically expanding all the stuff that I wrote, I did like, short posts, for each one. And I was going to turn that into sort of like 1,200 word analysis on every one of the stories that I was featuring.
I want to know how you define best.
Well, now that's there's all kinds of ways. A lot of it is sort of like fan sort of the consensus that the fan base has got. Like most all the fans at that time considered Peter Davison's final story, Caves of Androzani, to be the best Doctor Who ever made. So, you have that sort of like fan consensus to go on. And then I sort of mixed in my own personal things. There's a couple that are, popular, but I think are much better than general fan consensus gives it credit for. So something like John Pertwee's Day of the Daleks, which was the first story of season 9 back in 72, I think it was. I think that's an amazing story. So I put it much higher in my ranking than maybe any other fan would have. And there's a William Hartnell story called The Gunfighters. It's the sort of like the events leading up to the shootout at the OK Corral. And I think it is remarkably funny and a really sharp script. And it's not very popular amongst fans, but I love it. So I put it in my book.
Man, can't you sing a little?
Well, yes, a little, but why say it at all?
Well, I had to find some sort of suitable cover after all. You can't walk into the middle of a western town and say you've come from outer space. But gracious me, you'll all be arrested on a vagrancy charge.
What was your number one?
I made the 50th anniversary story the best one, because it was really, really good. I mean, it was just remarkably well written and well produced, and did a lot to tie in sort of the new history that the modern series had been developing with some of the events in the classic series.
Oh, lovely. Why are we all together? Why are we all here?
I remember this. Almost remember.
Oh, you've redecorated. I don't like it.
I'm looking for the Doctor.
But you have great respect among the Doctor Who production team and the actors, because a number of times when they can't remember stuff, you do.
That's true. But, I feel like it's my job to remember. Their job was to have made the show. It's my job to catalog it all in my head.
Is the book still available?
Oh, yeah. I actually did a rewrite on it for a second edition. The first one was called Doctor Who's Greatest Hits, and I sort of took that musical theme and I called the new one Doctor Who's Greatest Hits Remastered. And the original one was sort of a ranking of, like from number, I think I did 55 in the book. So number 55 to number 1 in, my order of preferences. And so for the rewrite, I changed it completely up, and I did it in chronological order. Because I wanted to sort of illustrate the sort of production, the developmental history of the show. And also because I thought it was a better way to group stories together by Doctor. And then I gave an introduction to how I wrote a whole new introduction, a big entry on how the original series was created and developed. And then it did the same thing for the new series, how it was created by Russell T Davies and developed into what became on screen. And sort of gave a bit more biographical information on each of the lead actors. So I took the opportunity to expand what I had done. And I think the resulting book was a bit big. It's a bit overwhelming. So I think for the 60th, I'm going to do another rewrite, and I'm going to split it into 2 volumes to make it just a bit more manageable.
Yeah, because
it became massive.
There is one thing that's on your TV, the one thing that you should watch only, the only good thing on the BBC. Who could it be? Who could it be?
Have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the 4th dimension? Have you?
Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
I'm reversing the polarity of my ultrasonic screwdriver's power source.
Doctor, catch his robot.
And I'm not a pain.
The interesting thing is, before it became good, it was evil. Nothing's just rubbish if you have an inquiring mind.
I love humans. All of us seeing patterns in things that aren't there. Before I go, I just want to tell you you were fantastic. So was I.
I'm the winner. That's who I am. Time Lord victorious.
Take it! Take it all, baby! Have it! You have it all!
Who put those notes and phrases together?
Lost my key.